Hey, back again, and I am ready to start doing this. Making a border that surrounds my grid. Real quick, before I do, I changed a couple things since the last video, and one of them is, the main one is the grid block. If you notice, I don't have anything on the stop animation anymore, and I got rid of all the frames, and what I did is I created some new animation sequences. Instead of using any of the default ones. And I named them as following, and I put a number after each one so I remember which animation frame this actually is. Okay? And then I had to change in my code this bottom line here. Oh, sit still. Oh my god. This one right here, because I had it forcing it to the animation frame. Well, now I have it set to the animation sequence. It still works the same though. All I gotta do is change the number here, but this now refers to the animation sequence of the block rather than the frame. So right now it's set to 15, which is the last one. And if I set it to 14, so on and so forth. Okay, but I'm going to keep it at 12, which is the bottom one. One key thing to note about this is that these all have to be set to loop, because if you don't, say if this wasn't looped and I have it set to 15 but it's not looped, it'll default back to the first one in the list, which would be 12. So anyway, just keep them loop like that. Added a bunch of alterable values here, explain them as I go, and some strings. Added a new object. This is what I'll be using for the border around my grid. As you can see, it's the same size as my grid object. It can be any size you want, as you'll see shortly. The other thing, oh yeah, in my debugger, I added a new, I changed my counter to keep track of the total amount of borders that I have, and I added that into my code right here. So I set it to this counter to the number of objects. For the most part, when I create my grid and I have a border around it, for the most part the border will be backdrops anyway. But there are times when I will want an active back border, and you'll see later, because I need to hide things behind it. Anyway, that'll become clear later. Anyway, for now, just know that I'm creating a grid, creating a border around it, and sometimes it'll be turned into backdrops, sometimes it'll be active objects, but it'll always automatically be resized to whatever size I make the grid. Now I know I'm not going to get through this in one video, so I'll probably end up making two, because I don't want to rush too quick. Alright, I'm just going to get into it. I need to just clean this, make it a little neater. Deactivate the grid group. As soon as my grid has been created, I then need to deactivate this group. So for performance wise, you don't want to have any active groups that are unnecessary. And once the grid is created, I don't need this group activated anymore, so Fusion won't read it when it reads down through the list. A quick way of doing that is, because I'm running a loop, one good way to do it is to create a condition. Only one action when event loops, group event, deactivate the grid. And it still creates a grid, but then the group will get deactivated after that. The way I am going to do it, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I'll just do this. When the number of grid blocks equals grid x times grid Y, because that's how many grid blocks I'm creating anyway, right? Once it reaches that, then deactivate the grid. Perfect. So once the grid is created, I want to create my border. So I'm going to create a new group and I call it the border. Deactivate at start. So grid's done. Let's activate the border. Okay, let's close that up. Alright, here's where it gets funky and probably confusing. And I'll probably have a hard time remembering what the heck I'm doing. Okay, just give me a second here. Okay, to start off, I'm going to create an always event. And I am going to spread value in grid ID 1. Okay. So what happens when I do that is this grid, once it's created, I'm spreading the value in it. So if you read Popcorn's tutorial that I mentioned before, what happens is this will end up being number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Get it? And it keeps going like that. Yeah, create another always event, and we'll start a for each loop for the grid, and we'll call it border. Okay, I'm going to be using this for each loop here in a second. Now, the first thing I want to do is once my grid gets created, I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to create a border across the top. And the animation I have for that is this one right here. The hotspot is the important thing. See, I have it set at the bottom here. Just remember that. Okay, so on for each loop for the grid there, we named it border. Right? Use border. Here's where it gets tricky. I don't know how much of this I'm going to explain, but over each border, if the Y position of the grid equals the Y start position, right? So if one of these at the top, well, that's what it is going to be, it's at the top, equals the start position, and this is our start position across here, right? If it equals that, I'm going to throw in another thing here. Multiple values, compare multiple values. If top border equals 0, okay, and the reason I use this here is because once I create this object, okay, we'll just create it right at the block, doesn't matter. Once I create that, when the loop runs through, as long as this is 0, it'll keep creating this. So to fix that, I change this to, set this to 1, like so. Okay. Now I want to change animation sequence. We'll use calculation, and I haven't set this up. Crap. Back here, we'll add another one here in the values. And what should we call it? How about call it, come on, call it board border. I don't know, we'll go with the other one. Display. So we get the grid display and the border display. What border do we want displayed? We'll set the value at 12. Okay. So back here, we created the border block and we set this good. Now we want to change the animation sequence of that. We'll use the calculation and we'll grab the value that we just set in the border display. So it should change it to that. Let's see. Alright, now we're going to set its Y position to the top part of this grid. So it'll be sitting right at the top here. Remember the hotspot? Right? And we want to set its direction to here. And one more thing, and this will make sense shortly here. We're going to set its altable string, active border. We're going to use to the string for the active top border. Good. Okay, so it's created the grid. The reason it kind of looks funny because it's the same color as the background. So let's change the color of the background here. Change this to something a little lighter. There. Now you can see it. So create a nice little grid at the top, but look at all the objects. What's going on, right? Well, create a new event down here. No. Okay, well, I have to go through all the events till I get this. But, yeah, set grid to 1. Grid ID. Oh, silly me. That's the wrong number. Edit. Set top border, because that's the number, or the value I used here, to 1. Great. So we're going to create 10. Okay, so we have 10 borders now across the top. Yeah, that's right. Okay, how much time have we got going on here? Okay, I'm already at 13 minutes. I'm going to stop this and continue right away, just so I don't make the video too long. So I will be right back.